So if you want to figure out how to plan your projects like a pro, then keep on watching. Hello YouTube family, welcome back to my channel. I'm Christina and this is Cultivated Chrissy. Now, in today's video, I'm giving you those 8 steps that you must complete to properly plan your project, okay? These are must-do items, and if you do these things, then you'll be set up for success in your project. So let's jump right into it. So planning your project for success starts with a great foundation. And what do I mean by great foundation? Well, as I said in several other videos, it starts with the project charter, okay? So what is the project charter? Well, that tells you the who, what, when, where, why, and how of your project, okay? It clearly defines objectives and the scope for your project. You're looking at sections and defining sections such as your SMART goal, your deliverables, what's in scope, out of scope, what are your deadlines, what are constraints, assumptions, dependencies, all these different things, right? You're answering that at the front end of your project so that you have a great foundation. And this is something that you're going to reference multiple times throughout the project. Like I stated before, you don't drive a car without direction and you don't start a project without a great foundation. And that is your project charter. So the next step is for the project manager to facilitate the project kickoff meeting. Now, what is the project kickoff? Well, this is something that the project manager facilitates, bringing all the members of the project team and your key stakeholders together and let them know what the project is, why it's happening, what are those key goals and expectations. We're letting them know that this project is about to start, okay? We've already engaged their supervisors and leads, and we're going to be pulling them in to really start to plan and execute this project. So this formally lets them know that this is taking place. I like to use PowerPoint to facilitate these meetings, and you can definitely use components of the project charter. You should use components of the project charter on this PowerPoint to facilitate the conversation and let them know what's happening, okay? So the next step to making sure that you properly plan your projects is to make sure that you have the right stakeholders. You want to document this in a stakeholder matrix, and you need to make sure that the right people are brought in, okay? You're going to be bringing in different people at different points of the project, and you want to know what are their areas of expertise, okay? What are their technical skills? How are they going to be contributing to this project? You want to make sure all of that is documented. On the project charter, you actually start to identify who these stakeholders are, listing out your project team members, those stakeholder groups that need to be represented, your subject matter experts, your technical experts, right? Or your SMEs, we call them. So you want to make sure that you're already starting to define that in the charter so that you're able to extract that information and start to build it out within the stakeholder matrix. So say, for example, you are a project manager on a project where you're integrating a social determinants of health platform into your electronic health record to facilitate referrals, right? Social determinants of health are really just housing needs, transportation needs, food needs, financial needs, things that patients may be in need of. You want to make sure that you facilitate a referral to a vendor that can help them with those different needs. And so, for example, you have a project like that. So who would be involved in something like that? Well, we're doing an integration into an electronic health record, right? So we need people from the electronic health record team represented in this project, right? If it's Epic or Meditech, one of those different electronic health records, we need people from those particular teams. Then, it's the nurses that are doing the assessment for social determinants of health and flagging that in the system. So we need the nurses. We're going to change their workflow slightly in order to do an assessment. So we need to make sure they're represented there as well. That notification is going to go to the patient navigators, for example. So the patient navigators need to come in because now their workflow is changing. So you want to think of it like that. Think of your project, think of what is going to happen as part of the workflow, who's going to be impacted either directly or indirectly, who's going to be directly involved. You want to make sure you're thinking all those things through and making sure all of those different groups are represented. It's imperative that the right people are brought into the project at the front end. And I say that because if that doesn't happen, it can cause a lot of rework. For me, early on, I remember having a project where we had a key stakeholder that was brought in somewhere in the middle of the project. And when she came in, she asked key questions that if we heard it in the beginning, things would have definitely went differently in the project. And so when she came in, it kind of derailed things because she asked some key questions that weren't thought about. And so we had to go back, rework, change the project plan because of this stakeholder. So you want to make sure that the right people are in the project at the start during the planning phase in order to properly plan the project and reduce that rework. Now, this doesn't mean you bring every single stakeholder into every single meeting, okay? I don't want it to sound like that's what you're going to need to do. You're going to have your core team members and you're going to have everybody else, right? All those other key stakeholders that need to be brought in. You just need to make sure you're identifying who these people are, what they bring to the table, what they need to be aware of, and when it is appropriate to bring them in, okay? So having the right stakeholders is key. That's tip number 3. So the next step in your planning phase is to gather your requirements, okay? Very important step. Now, your requirements basically tell you what is needed in order for the project to be deemed successful, okay? If you do all of these different things, if you complete all of these different requirements, the project would have successfully been implemented. So those things need to be defined. And those requirements should lead to completion of your deliverables, okay, in that same sense. So you want to collect all of those requirements and put it into a requirements matrix. Now, the requirements matrix lists out each of the requirements, it categorizes them, and then you're able to define the acceptance criteria, okay? So what does this specific requirement, what boxes does it need to check off in order for that requirement to be complete? So you want to outline that. You want to talk about who owns that requirement, what is the impact or level of effort for completing that, and that'll help you to define your priority for that particular requirement, and any other notes, okay, whether you're going to be outsourcing the requirement, etc. So this really helps you to organize all of the different requirements in the project, and you'll be able to take that and put it into your project plan. You'll be able to start to outline the tasks and steps for your project plan. So extremely important step. So how do you collect this information? Well, there are a number of different ways to collect requirements. You can do one-on-one sessions as well as group sessions, interviewing people one-on-one. You can send out a survey to collect information. You could do small groups, meeting with people by team, and then you could do large groups. I like to do the large groups at the end. I try to collect information individually and then pull everyone together at the end, because people feed off of each other's ideas, and it's helpful for them to see what other requirements people came up with, to see if they agree or disagree with that, right? You want to be able to collect all of that information. You write down everything in a requirements gathering session, and then you can kind of go through it later, but it's helpful for everyone to be able to see it. I like to collect as much as possible, send it out in advance of the large group meeting, and then of course after again. So next is the risk assessment. Now you want to make sure you're doing this at the front end of your project, because you can actually incorporate different steps into your project plan to try to avoid or mitigate some of these different issues that could potentially come up. So you want to make sure you're doing that and you're staying ahead, so that if these issues end up happening, you're able to stay on top of it and know exactly what to do next, okay? So with the risk assessment, these are things that could potentially impact your project, okay? These are things that could happen, not necessarily things that have happened. And so you want to, again, just stay on top of it and plan for it in the beginning. You want to document everything in a risk register, and the risk register just starts to outline all of the different risks that you've collected. You can collect this in different meetings. You've already started to collect it in the project charter, so you're going to aggregate all that information, put it into the risk register, have an evaluation on the impact of something happening, the likelihood of it happening, and then what your mitigation strategies could be and who would be implementing those mitigation strategies if this thing should come to fruition. So very important that you plan for your risks at the front end of the project. Next is the communication plan. How are people going to receive updates about the status of the project throughout the project? That's what this step addresses. You want to make sure for the stakeholders that you've defined, you understand what information they're going to need to see, how often they're going to need to see it, and what you're going to use in order to share that information, okay? What reports are you going to use? What meetings are you going to share this information in? Are you going to be sending it via email? Are you going to be attending a town hall every week? Are you going to be attending the Friday directors meetings? What are you going to do in order to share this information, and how will it be displayed? You want to make sure that you're documenting all of that in a communications plan. Now, I do have a free template for this below, so make sure you click the link. I will link it, but you want to make sure that you're documenting these things so that you're on top of your communications. And then you're going to share this with your team, okay? Let them know these are the forums that you're going to receive your communication in. You can simplify it, okay? It's a long table, so try to simplify the information and then send it out to your team. Let them know this is how they're going to receive updates on the project throughout the project. Now, for your team members that are impacted by this work, okay? It could be your frontline staff whoever is going to be impacted and have to change the way in which they work in order to use whatever the result is of this project, right? Whether it's a new software or a new service line, you want to make sure that those people are included in your communication plan, because people will resist what they don't understand. If they don't understand why they have to change what they're doing, right? No one's been communicating to them, then you're going to deal with resistance. And so it's very important that you plan for whoever is going to be impacted both directly and indirectly by this project, and include them on your stakeholder list, and make sure you have a plan for communicating what's happening with the project to them. Okay, very important. The next thing is the training plan. And just like with your communication plan, right, you've identified all these stakeholders that are going to have to change, and you put together a communication plan for them. Well, you also need to put together a training plan for these people. If they're going to have to acquire new skills or refresh skills or learn a new system or software, you want to make sure that they have the tools to do that, okay? At the time of go live, everyone knows what it is they need to do, okay? Everyone knows how to do that thing successfully. So you want to make sure that before the completion of the project, you have a plan for training those individuals, okay? A training plan should be included in your project schedule. So now that you have all of that defined, you have clear objectives that have been written out in your project charter, including constraints and timeframes and dependencies. You have your requirements that you've gathered. You have your risks that you have planned for, your training plan, your communication plan. Now that you have all of that, you can start to put together your project plan. And in your project plan, you're going to take all of this information that you learned and turn it into tasks. And then you're going to try to order it or organize it in a way that makes sense for implementation, right? A way that makes sense for your team. You can organize your tasks sequentially, right? One thing after the next, like kind of like building a house, or you can do it by deliverable, okay? You can organize it in different ways, but do what's best for your team. So the best way to write out the plan is you take that phase or deliverable, however you plan on organizing it, and then you're going to write out the key outputs of that phase or deliverable, okay? This is also referred to as your work packages. These are your requirements. So you're gonna take those key outputs, and then from there, you're gonna break it down further into all the key activities you need to do in order to produce that output, okay? And those outputs will lead to completion of the deliverables or that phase. All of that is how to simply write your project plan. Once you have all of that defined, now you can go into your project plan and start adding your durations, right? And you can get your durations from your subject matter experts, your technical team. They're going to tell you how long it's going to take them to do certain things. So you want to add in your durations. You want to add in who's responsible for each of the tasks. You want to add in your predecessors, right? These are essentially your dependencies between tasks, or your relationships between tasks. Do a certain task need to finish in order for me to start a certain set of tasks, right? Are tasks able to be started at the same time, right? A start to start relationship. So that's really important. And then you want to add in any constraints or timelines that need to take place. And usually that will be enough for the system that you're using, if you're using a project management software, to auto calculate what the dates are going to be for your project, right? You'll put in either a start date or end date, certain constraints, things that need to happen at certain times within your project, and then it can auto calculate once it has the durations and all of that in there. Okay, so you're going to want to make sure you're doing that. If you have resources that you need to complete certain tasks, whether it's personnel or materials, you're outlining that type of stuff and budgeting for that as well. So all of that is really going to help you to create a comprehensive project plan. Now you're going to review that project plan once you've completed it with your project team and your project sponsor. Get that sign off and approval, and then you can go ahead and start executing the plan. So that is how you properly prepare for your projects. As I stated in previous videos, piss poor preparation promotes piss poor performance, okay? And so we want to make sure that we properly plan for these projects. Don't make people rush you into just jumping into execution, because that does happen, especially when certain leaders don't really understand project management and they don't really understand the value of proper preparation and planning, and they just want to jump into execution. Help them to take a second and properly plan for their project, because if you don't, it'll lead to a lot of wasted time and a lot of wasted resources. So take the time to do it right from the beginning. Okay, that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. Like this video if you found it helpful, and subscribe for more videos on how to master the role of a PM. See you in the next one.